Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever noticed how much energy we spend pretending? Pretending we are always fine. Pretending we've figured it all out. Pretending the darkness within us doesn't exist. But the more you run from the shadow, the more it begins to chase you, not because it wants to destroy you, but because it longs to be understood. This speech is not about changing yourself. It is about meeting the version of you that you've banished into the corners of your mind. If you stay with me, if you listen deeply, not just with your ears, but with your being, you'll begin to see that your shadow was never the villain. It was the teacher you were taught to fear. And perhaps, by the end of this, you'll realize that peace was never about being flawless. It was about being whole. You were raised to believe that only the light is good, that the bright, smiling, successful, composed version of you is worthy of love, and so naturally you started cutting away anything that didn't match this image. The sadness, too heavy. The anger, too much. The insecurity, hide it. The pain, deny it. But the psyche is not a straight line. It's a circle. Psyche is not a straight line. It's a circle. And every part you try to escape from loops right back into your experience. In your reactions, your judgments, your triggers, they grow roots underground. And one day, they bloom. The shadow isn't just the darkness you suppress. It's the unlived life, the raw authenticity you sacrifice to belong. It's every no you never said, every tear you swallowed, every boundary you never set because you were too afraid to upset someone else's comfort. And yet the shadow remains loyal, patient, waiting for the day you're strong enough to meet it, not with fear, but with curiosity. When you feel jealous, it may not be evil. It may simply point to a hunger you've been taught to be ashamed of. When you feel anger, it may not be madness. It might be the signal that your spirit is tired of being walked on. Every discomfort is a doorway, and the shadow is the key. You see, the moment you stop resisting the shadow, a shift occurs. You begin to understand people more, because you no longer project your pain onto them. You begin to react less, because you recognize the echoes of your own unhealed wounds. You start to love more authentically, not as a role to perform, but as an act of being real. That is what the shadow gives you, depth. The ability to look beneath the surface, both in yourself and in the world. The irony is, the parts of yourself you've tried hardest to avoid are often the ones that hold the secret to your deepest clarity. What if you stopped asking, how can I get rid of this part of me, and instead asked, what is this part trying to show me? That is the beginning of wisdom. To realize that pain is not your punishment, it's your compass. That discomfort isn't a sign you're broken. It's an invitation to investigate. The more you explore your own shadow, the less you fear the darkness in others. And suddenly, relationships become richer, communication becomes clearer, and silence becomes less lonely, because you are no longer a stranger to yourself. There's no freedom in pretending, no growth in denial, no strength in repression. Real liberation comes when you walk into the cave you fear and discover it was never a prison. It was your womb, a place of transformation, a space where the old self crumbles and the true self emerges. Not in perfection, but in integration. Your shadow is not against you. It's your unacknowledged wisdom, your hidden light wrapped in darkness. So go there, sit with it, listen, because the one thing your shadow has always wanted is to finally be seen by you. The shadow is not some external demon lurking in the corners of your life. It is a mirror, silent, patient, and often uncomfortable to face. It reflects all the parts of yourself you'd rather ignore. The impulses you suppress, the thoughts you judge, the emotions you label as bad. But here's the irony. The more you try to distance yourself from your shadow, the more power it gains over you. It doesn't disappear. It hides in plain sight, taking shape in your reactions, your projections, your unexplained anxieties. The shadow is never gone. It simply waits for you to stop looking away. When we speak of understanding ourselves, we often imagine light, clarity, awareness, positivity. But true understanding begins in darkness, not because darkness is evil, but because it holds what the light often blinds us to. Your shadow holds your deepest wounds, yes, but also your most potent truths. It reveals where you've been hurt, but also where you've abandoned yourself in the name of acceptance, validation, or fear. The shadow is honest, brutally so. It doesn't flatter your ego, it confronts it. And that's what makes it the most accurate mirror you will ever encounter. When you begin to observe yourself with sincerity, you'll notice something profound. Many of your struggles come from not your flaws, but your resistance to them. You feel insecure, but instead of exploring the source of that insecurity, you fight it, suppress it, try to outperform it. You feel angry, but rather than listening to that anger, you label it as wrong and push it down. The more you do this, the more fractured you become. The person you show to the world becomes more and more distant from the person you truly are inside. And this split, this internal disconnection, is what leads to confusion, depression, anxiety. Not because you are broken, but because you are not integrated. But when you stop running, when you turn to your shadow, even for a moment, something begins to shift. You realize your shadow is not trying to destroy you. It's trying to show you something. That jealousy you felt, maybe it's pointing toward a desire you've buried under duty or guilt. That bitterness, perhaps it's revealing a part of you that feels betrayed or unheard. These uncomfortable emotions, when mirrored by the shadow, are not attacks on your spirit. They are revelations. They are unhealed stories asking to be told. And here's the most surprising part. The shadow doesn't just reflect your wounds. It also reflects your potential. Think about it. How many of your greatest strengths were born from a place of darkness? The artist who paints to process pain, the leader who speaks with empathy because they've known silence, the teacher who brings wisdom because they've walked through ignorance. These are not coincidences. They are the gifts of the shadow, the transformation of darkness into depth. To see your shadow is to reclaim the parts of yourself that you've exiled. It is to say, this too is me. Not in resignation, but in recognition. Because until you accept what's in the mirror, You will always be haunted by it. But when you look, truly look, you begin to see the full picture. Not just the curated image, not just the socially acceptable version of yourself, but the whole being. And in that wholeness, there is peace. Not the peace that comes from avoidance, but the peace that comes from knowing deeply, honestly, without judgment, who you are. The shadow is not your curse. It is your compass. It is there to guide you into deeper understanding, to show you where you have been split, and to offer the opportunity to become whole again. It's not easy. Looking in the mirror rarely is, but it is necessary. Because only by facing the reflection can you stop being afraid of it. And in that fearless seeing, transformation begins. Your shadow, in the end, doesn't want to hurt you, it wants to join you. It wants to be loved. And the moment you look into that mirror and say, I see you, you begin to walk not as half a person, not as a polished mask, but as a whole being, ready to live truthfully, deeply, and free. Repression is a quiet force. It doesn't scream, doesn't break things in front of you. It seeps. It hides behind polite smiles, logical explanations, and hollow affirmations. And yet it is one of the most powerful sources of inner confusion. When you repress something, a thought, an emotion, the truth about yourself, the very act of repression divides you. It creates a war inside. One part of you insisting, this is who I am, while another part whispers, no, this is who you're trying not to be. Over time, the noise of this conflict grows louder. You find yourself reacting to things without understanding why. You feel triggered, but can't explain it. You lose energy, clarity, and even a sense of direction, because so much of your being is tangled in keeping the mask intact. And slowly, your authentic self, the one with real desires, honest feelings, raw creativity, gets buried under layers of roles, expectations, and fear. The confusion that arises isn't a mental defect. It's not that you don't know who you are. It's that you've hidden too much of yourself from yourself. When you repress your sadness, you might lose your capacity for empathy. When you repress your anger, you might also lose your sense of self-respect. When you repress your fear, you may lose your ability to recognize danger. Every emotion, even the uncomfortable ones, has a purpose. When you silence them, you don't just lose the pain, you also lose the wisdom that pain was trying to teach. And repression often doesn't start with malice. It starts with survival. Maybe as a child you learned that being too emotional made others uncomfortable. Maybe you discovered that showing vulnerability invited ridicule, so you adapted. You hid parts of yourself to feel accepted. You disowned your authenticity to avoid judgment. But over time, what once protected you begins to imprison you. The fortress becomes a cage, and the self you present to the world becomes more of a performance than a reflection. As this disconnect grows, your inner world becomes more and more distorted. You begin to project your repressed emotions onto others. You see arrogance in someone's confidence because you've repressed your own sense of worth. You see cruelty in someone's honesty because you've repressed your own ability to speak the truth. You mistrust people who live freely because you've trapped your own aliveness in chains of control. What you repress, you don't eliminate, you externalize. And then life becomes a mirror, reflecting back what you've refused to see within. The path to clarity, then, does not begin with more thinking. It begins with listening. Listening to the parts of yourself that you've silenced. The sadness that says, something needs healing. The anger that cries, this boundary was crossed. The fear that whispers, I've been here before and I was hurt. None of these feelings are enemies. They are signals. Signals that something within you longs to be acknowledged. Allowing these feelings doesn't make you weak. It makes you whole. To sit with what's uncomfortable, to face what you've buried, takes more strength than pretending it doesn't exist. And as you do this, as you unrepress, as you allow your truth to rise, the fog begins to lift, confusion transforms into understanding, reactions become insights, and what once felt chaotic begins to make sense. It's not about indulging every emotion or becoming lost in them. It's about being honest enough to let them speak. Because when you listen, when you truly allow what's within you to rise without judgment, you begin to reclaim the pieces of yourself you left behind. And with each piece returned, you become more rooted, more grounded, more clear. Repression is a misunderstanding. The belief that hiding something makes it go away. But nothing real ever disappears. It waits. And it will wait until you are ready, not to fight it, but to feel it. And when you do, when you meet it with awareness rather than avoidance, the confusion that once ruled you dissolves into something far more powerful. Self-acknowledge. If you feel lost, disconnected, uncertain, don't seek new answers outside. Look inward, gently. Ask yourself what you've not allowed to feel, what you've been too afraid to say, what you've been taught is too much or not enough. And when you find it, don't run, sit with it. Because buried beneath what you repress is the truth you've been searching for all along. We are often taught to chase the light, seek happiness, embody positivity, strive for peace. The world celebrates those who smile, who rise above, who shine. But in this pursuit of light, something vital gets lost. We begin to believe that anything dark within us must be wrong, that sadness must be fixed, that anger must be hidden, that fear must be conquered. Yet wholeness was never about choosing light over dark. It was about understanding that both are essential. One cannot exist meaningfully without the other. Just as day needs night to define its brightness, the soul needs darkness to deepen its awareness. Darkness does not mean evil. It means the unknown, the hidden, the unconscious. The parts of you that you haven't yet brought into the light of awareness. The shadow is made of this darkness, not to be feared, but to be explored. Because within it lie the very keys to your completeness. The more you avoid it, the more you split yourself in two, the self you show and the self you deny. This split is what causes suffering, not the darkness itself, but the refusal to embrace it. Secure, displayed, agreed, joyful, positive, but underneath there's grief. There's grief, the grief of pain, the grief of loss, the grief of rejection, the grief of fear, the grief of... There's a quiet desperation, asking to be heard. And the more you ignore it, the more it leaks out in destructive ways, through anxiety, addiction, passive aggression, sudden outbursts, or depression. These are not random. They are the consequences of trying to live as only half of yourself. A light without darkness is shallow. It is performative. It's a smile that doesn't reach the eyes. It's happiness that depends on conditions. But when you bring the dark into awareness, something changes. Your joy becomes more grounded. Your peace becomes more profound. You no longer fear what's beneath the surface, because you've sat with it. You've seen it. And in seeing it, you've removed its power to control you. And this is not about romanticizing pain or glorifying suffering. It's about understanding that avoidance creates more pain than presence ever could. The dark parts of you are not interruptions on the path to enlightenment. They are the path. They are the terrain your soul must walk to become whole. You grow not just by shining brighter, but by diving deeper. Think of the seed. It does not sprout in the sun. It begins in the soil, in the dark, in the quiet, in the unseen. Only there can its roots find strength. Only there does it begin the journey upward. And you too must root yourself in your own darkness before you can rise into your true light. Wholeness, then, is not a destination. It's an ongoing embrace. It is the daily willingness to say, this too is part of me. The doubt, the fear, the insecurity, the longing. When you include these in your sense of self, something beautiful happens. You stop fighting yourself. You stop pretending. You start showing up fully, vulnerably, truthfully. And that is where real strength begins. Many people believe that spirituality means escaping the shadow, becoming pure, transcendent, above it all. But this is a misunderstanding. True spiritual depth is not about rising above the mess. It's about going through it, eyes open, heart steady. It's about becoming intimate with the full spectrum of your being. Only then do you stop being afraid of yourself. Only then do you stop judging others for reflecting back the parts of you that remain unaccepted. You were never meant to be all light. You were meant to be whole, and wholeness is messy. It includes contradiction, complexity, paradox. It includes both tenderness and fury, clarity and confusion. To accept this is to return home to yourself, not as an ideal, but as a living, breathing, evolving being. So let go of the belief that light is superior to dark. Let go of the idea that you must cleanse yourself of all negativity before you can be worthy. The darkness within you is not a flaw. It is an invitation to go deeper, to uncover what you've hidden, to meet yourself not as an image, but as a truth. And in that meeting, in that silent and sacred space between rejection and acceptance, you will find something astonishing. Not shame, not failure, not weakness, but wisdom. A wisdom that could only emerge from the depths. A wisdom that knows light and dark are not enemies. They are dance partners. And the dance of life begins when you stop choosing sides and start moving with both. Inner conflict is often misunderstood. We tend to see it as a weakness, a flaw in our emotional structure, something to be fixed, silenced, or overcome. But what if that conflict isn't the problem at all? What if it's the beginning of your transformation? The tension you feel inside, that push and pull between who you are and who you're trying to be, between what you want and what you fear, that is not failure. That is the moment before awakening. We are born whole, but along the way, we start dividing ourselves. We learn what is acceptable and what is not, what earns love and what causes rejection. And slowly, we begin carving ourselves into fragments. The parts that feel safe to show, we call our personality. The parts that feel threatening or vulnerable, we cast into the shadow. But those castaway parts don't die. They wait. They whisper. And often they scream in the form of conflict. When you feel torn between staying and leaving, between speaking up or staying quiet, between being kind or setting a boundary, it's easy to assume that something is wrong with you, that you're lost or broken. But in truth, that conflict is where your transformation lives. Because it's only when two truths collide within you that a deeper truth can emerge. The version of you that seeks peace and the version of you that carries rage are not enemies. They are each holding a part of your humanity. And until you listen to both, you'll never understand the full message of either. Most people try to resolve inner conflict by choosing a side. They suppress one voice and amplify the other. But this only deepens the division. The part you silence grows louder in the dark. It will find ways to return to relationships, dreams, illness, or unexplained anxiety. You can't amputate a part of yourself and expect to walk freely. You must instead turn inward and ask, why are these parts at war? What does each one want for me? What is the deeper need hiding behind their struggle? Often you'll find that the conflict is rooted in love. One part of you wants you to be safe, to avoid risk, to avoid pain. Another part wants you to grow, to speak the truth, to take the leap, to be free. Safety and growth are not opposites. But when we fail to listen, we mistake their language for opposition instead of integration. That's where the struggle intensifies, not because you are fractured, but because you haven't yet learned to speak the language of your own soul. Inner conflict is also a sign of evolution. The old self is no longer sustainable, but the new self hasn't yet been born. You're in between, raw, uncertain, exposed. This space is sacred. It is the crucible in which your deeper self is forged. It's uncomfortable, yes, but it's necessary. Think of a snake shedding its skin. The shedding process is painful, but staying in a skin that's too small is suffocating. Your conflict is telling you something old must die so something more authentic can emerge. The challenge is to stop running from the discomfort of this process, to stop trying to fix it with shallow affirmations or distractions. Instead, let the conflict teach you. Sit with it. Let it burn away your illusions. Let it show you where you've compromised your truth for the sake of being liked. Let it show you where you've been hiding, where you've been lying to yourself, where you've been living small. And in that space, in the stillness of not rushing to solve or escape, something begins to shift. The parts of you that were at war start to soften. They begin to speak to each other. Integration begins. And with it comes clarity, compassion, and power. Not the power to control the world, but the power to know yourself, fully, honestly, without shame. Your inner conflict is not a mistake. It is the friction required to awaken. It is the heat that melts away pretense. It is the tension that carves new depth into your being. Embrace it, not because it feels good, but because it is real, because it is necessary, and because on the other side of that struggle is not perfection, but wholeness, and that is where your strength truly lives. And that is where your strength truly lives. Avoidance is a subtle kind of self-betrayal. It often doesn't look harmful on the surface. In fact, it can wear many appealing masks. Being positive, staying productive, keeping busy, or simply moving on. But beneath that surface lies a quiet, persistent illusion. The belief that what you don't look at won't affect you. That if you deny your pain, it disappears. That if you ignore your fears, they vanish. But this isn't how consciousness works. What you avoid does not dissolve. It only retreats deeper into your unconscious, and from there it begins to distort your perception of the world. When you avoid your shadow, you begin to live inside a hall of mirrors. You stop seeing reality as it is, and instead start reacting to projections, unresolved wounds disguised as present problems. You might think someone else is being judgmental, when in truth, you're seeing a reflection of your own inner critic. You might label someone as too emotional, when what really unsettles you is your own denied vulnerability. In this way, avoidance becomes the architect of illusion. It doesn't just hide the truth, it reshapes it. This illusion can feel safer than truth. After all, truth demands that you feel, that you pause, that you confront the raw, uncomfortable parts of yourself that you've been taught to hide or fear. Avoidance, by contrast, allows you to keep moving, to stay distracted, to maintain the appearance of stability. But this safety is false. It's like painting over cracks in a wall. The structure may look solid for a while, but eventually it collapses from within. The cracks return, wider than before. Every time you avoid a part of yourself, be it grief, guilt, resentment, shame, you are also avoiding the lesson it carries. These feelings, however heavy, exist for a reason. They are messages from the deeper self, signals pointing towards something unresolved, something misunderstood. These are messages made by the soul for me to understand. From home I intuit that I can't proceed on my own. These feelings, however heavy, they move. They are life, death, something, and until you turn toward them, you remain stuck in cycles you can't break. You repeat patterns in relationships, you sabotage your own progress, you feel like something is missing, even when everything on the outside looks fine. Avoidance, then, isn't just about discomfort. It's about delay. It keeps you circling the same emotional territory, never arriving, never evolving. It disconnects you from your own intuition, because intuition requires honesty. It distances you from others, because connection requires vulnerability. And it blinds you to the richness of life, because True presence includes joy and sorrow, light and shadow. But the moment you stop avoiding, even just for a moment, the illusion begins to crack. And through that crack, something more honest shines through. You might cry, you might tremble, you might feel lost at first. But what you're feeling isn't your weakness, it's your return. The emotions that flood in aren't there to drown you, they're there to cleanse you, to show you where you've been pretending, to bring you back to what's real. The shadow holds not just your pain but your power, not just your trauma but your truth. When you avoid it, you keep that power locked away. But when you face it, when you finally say, I'm ready to see, you begin to reclaim yourself. And the world becomes clearer, people become less threatening, challenges become more manageable. Because you're no longer being led by unseen forces, you're seeing them, naming them, integrating them. This doesn't mean you dwell in darkness. It means you acknowledge it, walk through it, and come out with deeper wisdom. The process is not about staying in the pain, but about passing through it consciously, about using your awareness as a light to see what was once hidden. And in doing so, you expand, you grow, you evolve, not into someone new, but into more of who you truly are. Avoidance may offer temporary relief, but it comes at the cost of authenticity. Presence, on the other hand, demands courage, but it gives you your life back. Not a life shaped by fear, but a life built on truth. If something within you aches, don't run, don't distract, don't suppress. Sit with it. Listen, not because it's comfortable, but because it's real, and only the real can set you free. What you avoid becomes your prison, but what you face becomes your passage, and beyond that passage lies not just understanding, but wholeness. A wholeness no illusion can ever replace. Discomfort is not the enemy, it is the messenger. It's the inner alarm that goes off, not because something is wrong with you, but because something within you is awakening. The painful emotions you feel, whether it's shame, fear, anger, or loneliness, are not there to torment you. They are there to speak to you. And the truth is, the most powerful lessons in your life rarely come dressed in ease and joy. They often arrive wrapped in discomfort, because only discomfort has the power to disrupt the illusion you've grown too comfortable with. Most people are taught to avoid pain at all costs. We're told to cheer up, to move on, to be strong, to stay busy. But in avoiding discomfort, we also avoid depth. We miss the opportunity to explore where that pain is coming from. And more importantly, we miss the wisdom it carries. Pain doesn't emerge in a vacuum. It comes from somewhere. It has a history, a cause, a meaning. And if you dare to sit with it, if you give it your attention rather than your resistance, it begins to unfold. Like a tightly wound knot, it begins to loosen. And in that loosening, clarity emerges. Discomfort arises when your current life cannot contain your deeper truth. When the identity you've built no longer fits the growth that's trying to happen within you. So the discomfort comes as a crack in the shell. It's not pleasant. It shakes you. It makes you question yourself. But what it's really doing is preparing you. Pain is the psyche's way of saying, there is more to see, there is more to understand. Think about it. How many breakthroughs in your life were born from ease? Very few. Growth doesn't happen when you're comfortable. It happens when you're stretched. When something challenges your beliefs, your patterns, your assumptions. That challenge feels like pain, but beneath the surface it's transformation knocking at the door. Most people slam the door shut. They numb themselves with distraction, bury themselves in work, drown in entertainment, or run toward the illusion of certainty. But those who are willing to open the door, even just a crack, begin to see what that pain is pointing toward. Maybe the sadness you feel is asking you to grieve something you've never allowed yourself to mourn. Maybe the anxiety is signaling a part of your life where you're living out of alignment. Maybe the anger is showing you where you've betrayed your boundaries too many times. These emotions aren't irrational. They're intelligent. And their discomfort is the very thing that makes them impossible to ignore. This is why discomfort is sacred. It's the place where your mask begins to fall off, where your soul starts to speak louder than your ego. And if you let it, discomfort will become your greatest teacher. It will show you where you've been asleep. It will expose the false narratives you've clung to. It will push you toward truth, even if it does so with trembling hands. The problem is not that we feel too much. The problem is that we've been taught to judge what we feel, to call certain emotions bad or weak, to label certain thoughts as shameful. But nothing within you is inherently wrong. It only becomes dangerous when ignored. When suppressed, these uncomfortable truths become distorted. But when welcomed, they become clear. They tell you what you truly want. They reveal who you really are beneath the conditioning. The discomfort you fear is often the doorway to your freedom. The more willing you are to sit with what feels unpleasant, the more you grow in resilience, in self-acknowledge, in depth. You stop living on the surface of your life. You stop reacting blindly. You begin to respond from a place of wisdom. And no, this isn't easy. But ease is not the goal. Truth is. And truth requires that you feel what you've been avoiding, that you touch the raw edges of your experience and listen without flinching. Because what you discover there is not weakness. It's strength you didn't know you had. It's clarity you didn't know you needed. The next time you feel discomfort, don't run. Don't rush to fix it or numb it. Stay. Breathe. Listen. Ask, what are you trying to show me? Because hidden inside that discomfort is a message. And that message may just change your life. Not by making you more comfortable, but by making you more real. What you suppress doesn't disappear. It waits. And while it waits, it grows in silence, gaining weight and influence over your thoughts, behaviors, and decisions. What you push down into the unconscious doesn't simply remain buried. It transforms into the lens through which you see the world. And the deeper you suppress something, the less you realize how much control it has over you. The truth is, your unmet needs, the parts of yourself you were told were too much, too sensitive, too needy, don't vanish. They become shadow. And your shadow is filled with the echoes of these denied parts of you trying to be heard. We suppress not because we're weak, but because we've been trained to do so. From early childhood, we're taught what emotions are acceptable and what are not. We learn that expressing sadness may make others uncomfortable, that showing anger may get us punished, that longing, vulnerability, and fear are signs of weakness, so we adapt. We push those needs out of sight, bury them beneath performance and perfectionism, and call that strength. But true strength does not come from suppression. It comes from integration. When you suppress your deepest needs, you begin to live a fragmented life. You build relationships from your surface self, but wonder why they feel unfulfilling. You chase goals that look good on the outside, but leave you feeling empty inside. And then you begin to question your own feelings, your own worth. But the issue isn't that you're broken. It's that you've abandoned a part of yourself in an attempt to fit into a mold that was never made for you. Those suppressed needs, though, never give up. They show up in disguised ways. In envy when you see someone living freely, in anxiety when you're forced to be still, in the constant restlessness that tells you should be doing more, achieving more, being more. But beneath all of that striving is often a very simple truth. You want to feel seen. You want to be loved as you are. You want to rest, to breathe, to be enough, without always performing. Suppressed needs often disguise themselves as dysfunction. But dysfunction is only the symptom. The root is always an unmet truth inside of you, a desire to be whole again. And until you turn inward and ask yourself what you truly need, you will continue to look outward for solutions that never satisfy. Take a moment and ask, what do I consistently deny myself? Is it the need for rest? The need to be heard without judgment? The need to express anger without guilt? The need to ask for help without shame? These questions are not signs of weakness. They are signs that you are finally ready to stop hiding from yourself. And when you allow those needs to rise, when you make space for them rather than suppressing them, you begin to return to yourself in the most profound way. There is no freedom in pretending you don't need. There is only exhaustion. Need is not the opposite of strength. It is the foundation of authenticity. When you allow your suppressed needs to surface, you're not regressing, you're healing. You're saying, this part of me matters too. And that act alone can shift your entire reality. This doesn't mean indulging every impulse or becoming emotionally reactive. It means learning to discern the voice underneath the reaction. The child within you who was silenced. The soul within you that wants to be felt. The truth within you that's been waiting for your permission to speak. You cannot live a full life while ignoring half of yourself. Suppressed needs create a life lived in the shadows, out of sync, out of touch, out of balance. But when you face them with honesty and compassion, you unlock a deeper intelligence within you. You begin to trust your feelings again. You begin to understand your patterns. You begin to live with intention rather than reaction. Stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking, what have I not been allowed to want? The answer to that question holds more power than any external advice or quick fix. It points you toward the very thing you've been missing, your own permission to feel, to ask, to need, to be. And in that brave return to your truth, you will find what you've always been seeking, not from the world, but from yourself. Freedom doesn't come from running away from who you are. It comes from turning toward every part of yourself with honesty and compassion. And that includes the parts you've hidden, denied, or judged. The shadow isn't some dark force trying to sabotage your life. It's a collection of all the disowned aspects of your being, the fears you didn't feel safe to express, the anger you were told was dangerous, the desires you were shamed for having. But when you begin to see that your shadow is simply the unloved part of you, everything changes. We spend so much of our lives managing the image we present to the world. We try to be likable, successful, composed. We keep things positive. We push away anything that doesn't fit that image. And slowly, unconsciously, we exile pieces of ourselves into the unconscious. Over time, those pieces form what we call the shadow. And because we've rejected them, we start to believe they're foreign, dangerous, or wrong. But they are not. They are simply unintegrated. They are waiting for us to see them, understand them, and bring them home. This is the work of inner freedom, not in becoming someone new, but in becoming whole. You don't need to erase your shadow. You need to integrate it, to recognize that what you judge in yourself isn't always a flaw. It might be a strength that was never nurtured. It might be a voice that was never heard. It might be a need that was never met. And when you begin to listen, not from a place of fear, but from curiosity, something begins to soften inside you. Integration doesn't mean you act on every emotion or impulse. It means you stop being ruled by them in the dark. When you acknowledge your jealousy, your rage, your grief, your fear, they lose their grip. And because the most dangerous emotions are not the ones you feel, they are the ones you refuse to feel. Those are the ones that build pressure inside you, distorting your perception, shaping your behavior, sabotaging your peace, without you even realizing it. But when you bring those emotions into the light of awareness, they begin to speak. They begin to reveal the needs behind them. The sadness might reveal a longing for connection. The anger might reveal a boundary that was never honored. The fear might reveal a past wound that never fully healed. And as you meet these emotions with presence, you stop treating yourself like a battlefield. You become a sanctuary, a space where all of you is welcome. This is the essence of inner freedom. Not living a life where nothing bad ever happens, but living a life where you are no longer at war with yourself, where you no longer need to pretend, perform, or hide, where you can sit in stillness and not feel like something inside you must be fixed. Freedom is not the absence of darkness. It is the courage to walk through it, to learn from it, to carry its wisdom with you. And the truth is, what you fear in your shadow is often your hidden brilliance, your unapologetic truth, your untamed creativity, your bold voice. These things get pushed into the shadow, not because they're wrong, but because they didn't feel safe. And when you reclaim them, you reclaim your power. You begin to speak more clearly. You set boundaries more naturally. You connect with others more deeply, because you are no longer fragmented. You are whole. You become rooted, grounded, not easily shaken. Because your sense of self is no longer built on appearances, but on depth, on integration, on truth. Stop trying to be perfect. Stop trying to be only light. Let yourself be both. Let yourself be real. Because only in realness do you find peace. Only in integration do you find power. And only in embracing your shadow do you find your freedom. Not as a final destination, but as a way of being that allows you to move through life with courage, compassion, and clarity. The work is not easy, but it is sacred. And in doing it, you discover that you were never broken. You were simply incomplete. And your shadow wasn't your flaw. It was the part of you that held the key to becoming whole. The journey through your shadow is not a descent into darkness, but a return to truth. It is the courageous act of turning inward, not to judge or suppress, but to witness, to understand, and to embrace the parts of yourself that have been cast aside. Your shadow holds your pain, yes, but also your power, your voice, your wisdom, your depth. And by facing it, by feeling what you once feared, you become whole. Not perfect, but real. This is the essence of freedom, not in becoming light alone, but in becoming fully human. To stand with your contradictions and still love yourself. To stop running from discomfort and instead walk with it until it speaks. To stop hiding your needs and instead listen to what your soul has been asking for all along. The world tells you to fix yourself, but your shadow whispers a deeper truth. There is nothing wrong with you. You are simply waiting to be seen. And when you finally look, not with fear but with compassion, you unlock the life that only self-awareness can offer. You become integrated, rooted, free, not because you've erased the darkness, but because you've woven it into your light.